Hello and welcome to the second episode of the Pan Future Society podcast. I am your host, Sean, and today is Monday, May 30th, 2016. I realized last week when I did the very first episode ever of All Things, I forgot to tell you what day it was. So I think the actual release date for these podcasts will probably be about the same time. So you can infer from then when I did the first episode. Welcome once again to the show, and thanks for joining me. This week on your news of the moment, I came across a story this morning about a company called Newtonomy that is building autonomous taxis, self-driving cars used as taxis. They have just raised $16 million in capital funding. This company is based out of Singapore, it looks like, and they've been testing in Singapore. They've already got cars on the roads there that they're driving around, or the cars are driving themselves. And they're also working with the Singapore government to work on this technology. So that by itself is interesting. Not only are we close to self-driving cars, we're close to having a company that's actually using them as their primary service. This company, Newtonomy, is expected to hit a deadline of 2018, so only 2 years from now, for a fully functioning driverless taxi service. Now, if that weren't interesting enough on its own, there are also other companies doing this work, and they're competing. So this competition is going to drive the technology faster, and it's probably going to be to market sooner than you think. I really don't think this is one of those, it's 10 to 20 years down the road and we'll never actually see it, vaporware kind of things. Toyota has invested in Uber, and Uber is working on a driverless car. Apple has invested in a Chinese company that's working on these kinds of things. General Motors is also invested a bunch of money into Lyft, the car service, also to work on self-driving cars. So we have two things going on here. There's technology being developed, which is fascinating by itself, but we also have companies, Uber and Lyft, who are those on-demand, crowd-sourced sort of taxi services. You know, you just get the app on your phone, you need a Lyft, and you find someone to come and pick you up. It's not a taxi itself. It's just a private citizen with a car who's been authorized by Uber or Lyft to do this. Now, interesting there, too, these companies have come under fire often from unions and from other organizations that support taxi drivers because they're not unionized, they're not paid by Uber or Lyft, they're contracted. So there's a fight over what kind of a job this is. Are they getting paid what they should? Are people being charged the amount they should for these services? Well, I think that question is almost moot because it looks like pretty soon Uber and Lyft aren't going to have any drivers in the cars. So all you people out there who are making a little extra cash or even making a living as Uber or Lyft drivers, you might be out of a job soon. So hopefully that's not going to be too bad of a thing. But like I said in the intro show, this is one of those things that we're going to deal with as a society very soon. There were, I forget the exact number, 20-some thousand, 15,000, 40,000, whatever the number, fairly large number of taxi drivers in New York. In New York City alone, what if they were all replaced by driverless cars? From a safety standpoint, that would be great. But from a social and cultural standpoint, we need to figure out what people are going to do with their time if not only are the jobs not there, it's not because they got shipped overseas or something. It's because people don't actually have to do that job anymore. And it's a good thing in the long term for people not to have to do the job. But in the short term, there's a lot to deal with when people are displaced by machines like that. So, what do you think about all that? Let me know. Drop me a message on the website panfuture.org or write me at sean@panfuture.org. Let me know what you think about this driverless car thing. Would you take a driverless car? Would you get into a taxi with no driver in it and let it take you somewhere? I think a lot of people are going to be a little uncomfortable with that for a while. I think I could handle it around the city. I'm not sure if I would feel comfortable with a driverless car on the freeway going 70 miles an hour, even though, logically, it would probably be much better at it than I am. All right, that is your news of the moment for May 30th, 2016. All right, now on to our next segment. I think it looks like this is shaping up to be, or start the show with a near-term idea and maybe hit you with a long-term idea next. This week, I'm going to talk about the clock of the long now. This is one of the first things that really got me thinking about the far future. When I heard about this, probably 4 or 5 years ago initially, there's an organization called the Long Now Foundation, and one of their tasks is building a clock that will run for 10,000 years. This clock is under construction in Texas. From their website, designed by Danny Hillis, the clock is designed to run for 10 millennia with minimal maintenance and interruption. The clock is powered by mechanical energy harvested from the sun, as well as the people that visit it. The primary materials used in the clock are marine-grade 316 stainless steel, titanium, and dry-running ceramic ball bearings. The entire mechanism will be installed in an underground facility in West Texas. So that, in and of itself, is a fascinating idea to build a machine that can run that long. So if I recall correctly, this was originally going to be built somewhere in Nevada, but they've moved it to Texas due to whatever difficulty there was in getting the land available for use. I know they wanted to pick a spot that they could be reasonably sure was geologically stable. Obviously, building this in California would probably not be a great idea, just because unlikely the region would be undisturbed for that long. Once this clock is finished, it's going to take people some effort to go see it. They have built it pretty far out into the wilderness, and it's going to be a hike to get there. And they've done this intentionally. They want the act of going to see it to be more of an event. It's not just drive up in your car and go, oh, that's nice, and drive away. The whole part of the whole thought-provoking process of this clock is that you have to choose to make an effort to go see it. According to their website, the entire mechanism, the entire clock, is going to be about 200 feet tall. So it's also going to be a very large thing for you to go see. They're really building a monument to last for the ages, not unlike the pyramids or something like that. A little more from their website about how the clock actually works, or how it's calculating time. The clock maintains its long-term accuracy by synchronizing to the sun. The 10,000-year clock keeps track of 5 different types of time: pendulum time, uncorrected solar time, corrected solar time, displayed solar time, and horary time. Pendulum time is generated from the mechanical pendulum and adjusted according to the equation of time to produce uncorrected solar time, which in turn is mechanically corrected by the sun to create corrected solar time. Displayed solar time advances each time the clock is wound, at which point it catches up with corrected solar time. The clock uses displayed solar time to compute various indicators to be displayed, including the positions of the sun, the Gregorian calendar date. Horary time is a better approximation of dynamical time used to compute positions of the moon, planets and stars and the phase of the moon. So they've got a whole lot of calculations going on at once, but over that span of time, cover all your bases to make sure that the clock remains accurate. Uh, Also, on sort of the mechanical, functional side of the clock, I do recall reading they're going through a lot of development for how the time is displayed. 10,000 years from now, even 1,000 years from now, are we going to use the same calendar? What will a clock be? Will numbers mean the same thing? So you have to cover some bases to try to come up with universal symbols that many years from now somebody can read. I mean, we look at it took so long to decipher Egyptian hieroglyphics. There are symbols used in Mayan languages that they carved into stone, which lasted this long, but we can't read them because we haven't figured out all the details of what all that means. So if you want someone to read your clock 10,000 years from now, I would imagine that they'll have multiple different types of symbols so that somebody, even if you can't read it directly, you'd be able to figure out what it all means. So the purpose of this clock is to encourage true long-term thinking, and that's what it did for me. It is a huge stretch of the brain to imagine what life might be like 10,000 years from now, and to consider that what we do today can have an effect on that future, even though it's so far away. In some ways, it's a call not to just imagine what you'd like life to be, but to actually do something about it. The Long Now Foundation even writes the year in dates with a zero up front. So this year is not 2016, it's 02016. Just to put that bug in your head that there's more to the calendar than those 4 digits in the year that we normally use. 10,000 years is hard to reckon, but some comparisons could help. That is twice the age of the Pyramid of Cheops. That is twice the age of Otzi the Iceman, the guy they dug up out of the Swiss Alps. He was one of the oldest known mummies ever discovered. Twice that old. 10,000 years is twice the age of the oldest known trees. Human writing is thought to be about 5,000 to 6,000 years old. 10,000 years ago, humans were just first domesticating animals and learning to cultivate crops for farming. And 10,000 years ago, the last of the Ice Age giants were disappearing from the earth. That's 10,000 years. That's farther than we really have any scale for in human terms. But assuming humans last that long, we'll need to start reckoning those kinds of time scales better than we do now. Jonas Salk, the creator of the polio vaccine, once asked, "Are we being good ancestors?" Humans are not accustomed to thinking in such large time scales, but I think we would be far more progressive as a culture if we did. Can we approach life in a way that helps all of humanity move forward step by step, or are we discouraged by our short lives? And we feel like we don't have any impact. We can't have an impact over such a large time scale. Maybe as individuals we don't, but collectively, over millennia, we can keep moving forward. Here's a great quote from Daniel Hillis of the Long Now Foundation. "When I was a child, people used to talk about what would happen by the year 2000. For the next 30 years, they kept talking about what would happen by the year 2000. And now no one mentions a future date at all. The future has been shrinking by 1 year per year for my entire life. I think it is time for us to start a long-term project that gets people thinking past the mental barrier of an ever-shortening future." That was Daniel Hillis of the Long Now Foundation. So really, what is the future for us now? Since the year 2000, we've had endless cycles of elections, wars, trends. What far horizon can we look at now, and what point, what signpost sits out there beckoning us onward? The Long Now Foundation also has a number of other projects in the works aimed at encouraging long-term thinking and developing technologies that will help us survive and thrive in the long term. One of their projects is called the Rosetta Project. It is delving into long-term archiving. It is a means of focusing attention on the problem of digital obsolescence so that we can create storage methods that will be valid for a very long time to come. This is an interesting problem. As some of you may have heard, places like the Library of Congress has difficulty with some of its archives because they have to keep computers around that are 20, 30 years old just to have a machine that runs floppy disks or some obscure tape-based backup. To have all of this stuff actually available, all this knowledge useful to people, means being able to access it quickly and not to have to fix some 40-year-old machine and hope that it works or hope that your tape stock has held up over that long period of time. So the Rosetta Project has built a prototype of an item they call the Rosetta Disk. It is a 3-inch diameter nickel disc, and it has 14,000 pages of information microscopically etched onto its surface. With this method, each page is an image rather than a digital encoding of ones and zeros. You can actually read it with your own eyes using a 500 power optical magnification. The disc they have placed in a sphere of stainless steel and glass so that allows it exposure to the atmosphere but protects it from impact and abrasion. This potentially could be legible for many thousands of years, and you can store, obviously, 14,000 pages is quite a bit to put on a tiny little thing. Obviously, you still need a machine to read it, but I would guess some sort of machine to magnify something a great deal will always be around. I would think that we'll have that far into the future. Another project they have is the Long Server. This is a digital continuity software project from the Long Now. And they're researching into projects to provide longer-term lifespan, I would guess would be a way to put it, of servers and email infrastructure. So that's a bit above my pay grade to really know where that's going to go, but it sounds interesting. Another project they're undertaking is the Pan-Lex project. They're trying to take thousands of languages from around the world and make them all available for global communication. They are trying to devise a way to translate any word from any language into another, and not just sort of your basic English into Spanish or French into Mandarin Chinese, which would be more common, but any language from around the world, thousands that are out there. And it does come across the news every now and then, stories about how languages are disappearing around the world. So through this process of widespread translation, they're also hoping to preserve all these languages by not only recording them, but also making it easier for anyone to just continue speaking their own language that they were born into, and you don't have to drop that for something that's more widespread. The fourth project that the Long Now Foundation is undertaking is called Revive and Restore. With this, they're looking to use genetic technology to preserve species, to preserve the genome as data, to perhaps revive an extinct species in the future. They use DNA and genomic technology to provide disease resistance to threatened species, and also to be able to bring genetic diversity back to a threatened species that has lost that diversity. There's something called a minimum viable population. If you don't have enough of an animal species left to reproduce, in the long term, you'll have many, many problems due to inbreeding and that sort of thing. And this project would hopefully develop technology so you can manipulate those genes and artificially create genetic diversity. That's a very interesting topic, and we'll be delving more into genetics in the future. I'm sure it is not without its controversy. That is for certain. So, in a nutshell, that is your Long Now Foundation. With the clock of the long now, one of the first long-term thinking items that really got me down this path. If you want more information on who they are, what they do, they have a blog, they have seminars that they host on a regular basis, lots of ongoing information available there. Check them out online at longnow.org, longnow.org. All right, and that is your show for this week. Thank you once again for tuning in to the Pan Future Society podcast. My name is Sean, and I have been and will continue to be your host, unless something very strange happens to me, like I might be abducted by aliens and replaced by a pod person, in which case I will probably say that I am Sean next week, but don't believe me. If you want to check us out online, you can come to panfuture.org, panfuture.org. You can email me at sean@panfuture.org. And like last week, I did a little begging for money. If you want to help out, just drop me a line. I'll let you know how to do that. One way you can help out the show, defray some costs and all that stuff, is buy my music. I am a musician, and you've heard my music on the show here and there, some pieces of mine. You can go to seangill.bandcamp.com or strangeland.bandcamp.com and pick up some music there. All my music is actually available for free. If you just want to grab it and enjoy it, that's fine. If you want to throw a few bucks my way, that'd be great too. All right, people. Thank you very much, and I will talk to you again in the future.